The sun above Jerome, Arizona, was unforgiving that afternoon in July. They left him there, hogtied like an animal already sentenced, no trial, no compassion. Thicker rope cut into his wrists, a bag made of coarse burlap wrapped tightly across his head. The heat did not merely scorch skin. It burrowed into the lungs, dehydrating a man from the inside out. Sweat dribbled down his naked back, outlining muscle forged from years of honest toil or tougher battles. People in the town hung about him, their interest turning rancid with cruel glee. Initially, their gazes were keen and unfriendly. Then someone laughed. A youth flung a rock that skidded futilely in the dust. Nobody did anything to halt him. A dog barked once, then laid its head back down, as if even it had lost interest. I'd seen cruelty before, but not this kind. This was cruelty in daylight, done in plain view, and everyone acted like it was just another day. The whispers in town said he'd been caught near an old mine, blood on his hands, another man's satchel in his grip. No evidence, no eyewitness, only a tale repeated so many times it became believable. The sheriff propped himself against the hitching post, licking his dry stem, his hat low over his eyes. His half-closed eyes informed her he'd seen 100 days like this. She came out then. Nora Whitfield, 38 years old, 3 years a widow, more miles on her soul than most men had on their boots. She had not gone to Jerome looking past trouble, only for water and some shade. But when her eyes fell on the man kneeling in the dirt, she did not turn them away. There was something about the way he stood, still unbroken, that reached into her that she could not put into words. The heat between them shimmered. Her fingers gripped the reins tighter. In her saddlebag was the last thing of her husband she still possessed, a Colt .45, smoothed by his hand and more valuable than most men in Jerome made in a year. She didn't know the name of. Nora came down from her horse, her boots sinking into the dust. The square fell silent, that stiff, anticipatory kind of quiet in which you can pick out leather creaking and spurs clinking. The sheriff's gaze followed her, but he did nothing, that lopsided grin still twisting his lips. She halted only a few feet from him. The tension between them was thicker than the sun was. Her hand slipped into her saddlebag and brushed the cold steel of the Colt. She hadn't planned on parting with it. Then again, she hadn't planned on this. "You fixing to buy something, ma'am?" the sheriff asked, his voice slow, gravel rolled in molasses. She drew out the Colt and held it grip first. "This is worth more than any fine you'll ever collect." The sheriff spun it in his hand, thumb running over the well-worn walnut handle. "You planning to swap that for him?" He nodded toward the man on the ground. Nora said nothing. She didn't need to. His laugh was low, its tone short. "Guess that's a yes." He nodded to one of the deputies, who walked forward and ripped the sack from the man's head. Harsh sunlight made him squint. His face was weathered and tan, his eyes steady.
No pleading. No gratitude.
Just watching her. She couldn't read him, and maybe that's why she couldn't walk away. The ropes were removed next. He stood slowly, shoulders a-nodding like a man rediscovering his freedom. The crowd grumbled. Some of them looked disappointed, others simply interested. The sheriff pushed the Colt into his waistband. "He's yours now. Whatever trouble he brings, that's on you." Nora didn't reply. She spun, trudged back to her horse. He came along without comment. As he mounted behind her saddle, the balance shifted, firm and certain. They rode out of Jerome without a backward glance. The road before them lay long and dusty. For nearly an hour they traveled in silence, far enough outside of town for the dust to fall behind them. And then, when the trail grew narrow between two ridges, and here's the instant you don't blink. As they rode nearer, one of the riders raised his chin. "Afternoon," he drawled, stretching it out like he owned the clock. "Good horse you've got there, and a healthy-looking partner you're mounted on." The other man smiled, a mouth missing more teeth than it had. "Would be a shame if you just rode on without offering what you've got." Nora's mouth opened, perhaps to bluff, perhaps to delay. But before she could utter a word, they left him out there to dry in the July sun, like some creature they'd already convicted. No trial, no compassion. Just coarse rope digging into his wrists and a burlap bag tied over his head. Summer in Jerome, Arizona, doesn't just scorch your epidermis. It enters your lungs and parches you from the inside out. Sweat dripped down his spine, etching grooves through muscles earned through hard work or hard fights. The crowd didn't just watch, they judged. First with angry mutters, then with mocking laughter. A boy tossed a rock that missed. No one scolded him. A dog barked once, then laid in the dust, like even it had given up caring. I'd seen cruelty before, but this was something else. Violence in broad daylight, wrapped in the comfort of normalcy. They told him he'd been discovered by a deserted mine, blood on his palms and another fellow's satchel clutched in his hand. No evidence, no one to say they saw it, only a tale repeated enough to make it credible. The sheriff slumped against a hitching post, gnawing a parched stem, half-concealed eyes beneath his hat brim as if this were nothing more than a Tuesday. And then Nora Whitfield appeared in the square. 38, widow of 3 years. A woman who had more miles on her soul than most men had on their boots. She'd merely come to Jerome for water and shade. But when she saw the man in the dirt, she didn't turn away. He was immobile but not shattered. Something about that kept her standing. Her fingers clinched the reins. In her saddlebag was the one thing she still possessed of her husband, a Colt .45 worn smooth by years of handling. More valuable than some around here made in a year. She had no idea what the man's name was, or what crime he'd committed, but she knew she was soon going to risk her life to drag him out of that earth. Nora swung off her saddle, boots sinking in the dust. The square was silent, the sort of quiet where you can hear every creak of leather and every jingle of a spur. The sheriff stood watching her, that lazy smile still plastered on his face. She stood a few feet away, the heat bearing down more than the sun itself. Her hand found the cold steel in her bag. She hadn't planned on giving it up, but she hadn't planned on watching a man roast alive either. "You lookin' to buy something, ma'am?" the sheriff drawled. She offered the Colt grip first. "This is worth more than any fine you'll collect." He turned it in his hands, running a thumb over the worn walnut. Trading this for him? She didn't say anything, just locked eyes with him. He smiled. "Guess that's a yes." A deputy pulled the sack off the man's head. He blinked at the light, face leathery and dark, eyes firm.
No begging.
"No thanks. Just observing." The ropes were removed. He stood up slowly, his shoulders rolling as if learning to move again. The townspeople grumbled, some disappointed, some inquisitive. The sheriff pushed the Colt into his holster. "He's yours now. Whatever kind of trouble follows, it's on you." Nora turned speechless. The stranger trailed behind, quiet. When he mounted up behind her, she could feel the weight drop, solid, certain. They departed Jerome without glancing back. Trouble, however? Trouble doesn't require an invitation. They'd been riding an hour when the road narrowed between two ridges. Ahead, two riders sat too still in their saddles, hats low, rifles resting lazy across their thighs. Nora's stomach nodded. She didn't slow, but her grip shifted on the reins. She'd seen stillness like that before. It never meant anything good. One man lifted his chin. "Afternoon," he drawled. "Fine horse, and a mighty healthy-looking partner you've got there." The other smiled, teeth gaps. "Shame to not offer a share for riding on." Before Nora could say anything, the man in back shifted. 1 minute he was sitting on the horse, the next his boots touched the ground. He came toward them as if he'd been waiting for this all day. The lead rider raised his rifle, most likely thinking it would scare him off. Didn't. 3 steps. That was all it took to spin the barrel out of his grasp and send him to the ground. The second man pulled for his pistol, too late. The stranger yanked him off the horse, his gun clattering against the rocks. It was all over almost before it started. 2 burglars grunting in the dirt, and the stranger mounting the horse as if nothing had occurred. Nora did not ask where he had learned to move like that. She would learn soon enough. But she knew one thing: quiet days were over. A crow called. Sharp. Too close. Nora caught movement. 3 riders closing fast from behind, 2 more sliding out of a dry wash ahead. Same dust-stained coats. Same grins. Only this time they weren't alone. Her breath caught. The odds weren't just bad. They were suicidal. "Keep riding," said the man. His first words since Jerome. Flat voice. Steady grip on the rifle. The first bullet ripped the air. The horse jerked sideways. She urged it forward. Canyon walls ringing gunfire so close it seemed as if the bullets were skimming past her ears. "Left," he instructed. No deliberation. She turned. They cut off the main path onto a thin deer trail, branches lashing her arms, dust clogging her throat. The yells behind died away, then came again as loud as ever when the riders found another route. The trail dropped into a boulder-studded gulch just wide enough for the horse. Twice they came very close to losing their balance. His hand on her shoulder was what kept her upright. They splashed through a shallow creek, water refreshing the sweat on her face, before bursting into a clearing screened by cottonwoods. "They'll pass if we keep quiet," he whispered. Hoofbeats thundered past, so close that she could feel them pounding in the ground beneath her. Nora held her breath until they faded. By sundown, the chase was just a shadow on the day. They rode slower. The sky burned gold and copper, the kind of colors that vanish quick but feel like a gift when they're here. He foraged for wood at camp and she spread out blankets. Amidst the fire crackle and the gentle hum of the creek, Nora thought something through. Yesterday, he'd been bound and left to die. Tonight, because of him, she was still alive. Sorrow had held her immobile for years. She believed her life had ended when her husband never returned home. But perhaps life doesn't end. It merely awaits your return to the world. When she finally uttered words, they were not to inquire about his name. "You may remain if you wish." He didn't reply immediately, but when they locked eyes on the other side of the flames, she knew life in this place was tough, but simpler with someone who decided to ride along with you. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Sometimes the greatest things we ever discover are the things we never intended on finding. So ask me, if you were in her shoes, would you have pulled over or kept going?